We're going to talk today about what happened to the European world after the fall of Rome. Barbarian kingdoms take over. That's what happens. And barbarians are after power and glory. That's kind of what they prize, especially. There's three that were the main contenders to be the dominant force in the West, in the area that used to be the Roman Empire, the western part of the Roman Empire. You got the kingdom of Odoacer. He had taken over Italy. You got the kingdom of the Vandals, and then there's the Visigoths. These three were powerful. They had various strengths going for them. The Vandals were more of a kind of pirate group. The Visigoths had more of a land army, and Odovaker had a conglomeration of various tribes coming together working underneath him, which is in a way a kind of weakness because he's not united under one people group as these others are. So it seemed that one of these is maybe going to come to power, or they'll just kind of compete against each other. Then you have the Eastern Roman Empire that's still around, hasn't crumbled. One of the main things that the Eastern Roman Empire has going for it is Constantinople, which is surrounded by very, very large walls. To lay siege to Constantinople is going to be an extreme difficulty for anyone. And so the Eastern Roman Empire is pretty protected, but they still are going to have to deal with raiding bands of barbarians like the Ostrogoths and the Gepids who are nearby them. And they try to kind of play these groups off of each other, but the Ostrogoths just keep presenting a problem for them. And so they come to the Ostrogoths and propose a solution. How about you guys invade the kingdom of Odovaker? Go and rule there. Great solution. Get them off the back of the Roman Empire, and the Ostrogoths can have a greater territory of their own. They take them up on that. They're led by their king, Theodoric, and Theodoric ends up coming in and creating more order, and he was a relatively tolerant ruler, and things go pretty well under the rule of Theodoric. After the death of Theodoric, though, there's going to be a Eastern Roman emperor who decides that he wants to go and try to retake the West. That's not something that they just want to give up, the western portion of the empire. So Justinian is going to attempt to retake that territory. It's going to be a long, drawn-out war. He will succeed in retaking the land that had been ruled by the Vandals, some of the land that had been ruled by the Visigoths, and much of Italy will be retaken. But it's a very short-lived, it's very expensive, in the end not very wise. Now another group of people we have up here are the Franks, who initially don't appear to be a major threat. They don't appear to be on the realm of power of the Vandals or the Visigoths or the Ostrogoths, but the Franks are going to prove to be one of the most powerful of all of the barbarian groups, and they're going to end up expanding quite a bit. First, they'll take over the realm of Syagrius. Syagrius was actually left over. He was still part of the old Roman Empire, ruling over Roman forces. He's taken over by Clovis, the king of the Franks, and then Clovis is also going to take over a great deal of the territory of the Visigoths, basically the territory up to the north. And so he's building up an empire. Eventually it'll look like this. The conquest of Clovis lasts between about 481 and 511, and he builds a pretty substantial empire. You got the Ostrogothic kingdom that's still over here and still pretty powerful. But notice up to the north of the Ostrogothic kingdom, you got these people called the Lombards. Now the Lombards are going to creep in and create problems for the Ostrogoths, and they're going to become the new rulers down here in Italy. They're going to conquer land that had been conquered by the Byzantines. The Byzantines spent so much time conquering land in Italy And now the Lombards just come in and kind of sweep up the territory because there had been so much damage, so many people killed, that actually the territory in the north was relatively easy to conquer. And the Byzantines have a hard enough time trying to defend their own territory over in the east to keep putting out lots of expenses to fight over here as well. So they're going to lose more and more territory. The Lombards are going to be the ones to rule here. Interesting story about the Lombards in this conquest is a story about Rosamund and Albion. So Albion was the king of the Lombards, and as he's coming through and conquering territory on his way into conquering the Ostrogoths, he's going to also conquer the Gepids. And Rosamund was the daughter of the king of the Gepids, and after her father is killed, Albion is going to turn her father's skull into a drinking glass, and he's going to force Rosamund to marry him. And one day they're having a party, and he says to Rosamund, "Let us drink merrily with your father," meaning let's drink some wine out of this skull of your father. Rosamund is horrified by this, greatly offended, and she convinces someone to have her husband killed. And so he's put to death. In one story, she had his sword strapped to the bed so that when he went to grab his sword, he was unable. He was a very big guy, and so he felt pretty confident he'd be able to defend himself. But without a sword and with a seasoned warrior fighting against himself, he was unable to gain the victory. Now, the Frankish Empire, after the death of Clovis, is going to divide. This is part of a principle that the barbarians had. Many of them went by this, that when you die, you don't just simply pass on your kingdom to your oldest son. Rather, you let the sons fight it out. So Clovis's son is going to fight it out among his siblings and eventually come to be the head of all of the Frankish territory. Well, then after he dies, the kingdom divides again. Eventually, it's going to take on the form of essentially 3 kingdoms that are all Frankish, but ruled by different people. And so they kind of get along, kind of not. The main kingdoms are going to be Neustria, and then Austrasia, and Burgundy. And you see Aquitaine down there in the south also. Aquitaine's also kind of part of it, but Aquitaine is going to be a place where people are fierce about their independence, and they're going to be able to exert a certain amount of independence there. So really when people talk about the kingdoms, they're talking about Neustria, Austrasia, and Burgundy. Now those 3 are going to end up in conflict, and the conflict is going to have to do with these 2 people, Fredegund and Brunhilde. So Fredegund is somebody over in Neustria who is involved with the king of Neustria, whose name was Chilperic. Brunhilde was a princess from the Visigothic kingdom down in the south, down in what we consider Spain today, and she marries the king of Austrasia, who was Sigebert. And Fredegund was not actually married to Chilperic, the king of Neustria. And when Chilperic finds out Brunhilde has gotten married to his brother, the king of Austrasia, he decides he'd like to also have a princess from the Visigothic kingdom to marry. And so he marries Galswintha. This does not make Fredegund very happy. Fredegund is not married to him, so she can't exactly say, well, you're cheating on me, but she doesn't like it, and she keeps hanging around the king, and Galswintha doesn't like this. She wants to be the only person in her husband's life, and so she complains, and Fredegund convinces him to have her killed. Now Fredegund, in this picture, this is not actually the murder of Galswintha. This is Fredegund trying to kill her own daughter. She felt her own daughter was a threat, and so she tricks her. She says, hey, let's come look at some jewels here, and then she tries to smash her head in. And now we have a picture of the strangling of Galswintha. Now remember, Galswintha is the sister of Brunhilde. So Brunhilde is not happy about the death of her sister, and she does not blame Chilperic. She blames Fredegund. It's all Fredegund's fault. She feels, and rightly so, that Fredegund was somebody who really wanted power, didn't like Galswintha as a threat, and that she did what she could to get Galswintha out of the way. Now, other people are going to keep dropping dead. This is not the beginning. This is not the end of this. So you're also going to have the husband of Brunhilde die. Guess who just got murdered? Well, it's Sigebert. Sigebert had thought that he was actually plotting against Chilperic. He thought some of Chilperic's men had come over to his side, but they were actually tricking him into getting him alone. And while they're having a meal together, they had these utensils that they used that were called scramaxes. I don't exactly know how to say that word, but they took their scramaxes, which are kind of like forks, and they stab him to death. And who does Brunhilde blame for that? She blames Fredegund. Everything is Fredegund's fault as far as she's concerned. Now, Brunhilde's son is going to rule next after the death of his father. But guess what? He's also going to drop dead. When her son drops dead, she again blames Fredegund, and now she has power to do something about it, because she is now going to be ruling as regent. Fredegund's husband is also going to die, and she's going to become regent, and the two of them are going to go to war against each other until finally Brunhilde is going to be defeated. She's defeated actually by some of her own grandchildren. She was kind of in a divided position here where one of her grandchildren is ruling in Burgundy and one is ruling in Austrasia, and they end up at war, and Neustria is also involved. And when Fredegund's son gets a hold of Brunhilde, he has her killed in the most gruesome way he can find, which is by having her tied to a horse and dragged around until she finally drops dead. Now, the importance of the story of Brunhilde and Fredegund is it puts in mind for the Franks the danger of infighting between these kingdoms, especially infighting if you have women involved that have grudges against each other, like Fredegund and Brunhilde. They weren't really fighting over anything that mattered to anybody except for themselves. So they want to prevent civil war from happening in the future. And so they're going to have the Edict of Paris, passed in 614. And what the Edict of Paris does is it tries to set up some kind of guidelines to prevent future civil war. The guidelines aren't entirely clear, but one of the things that does come out of the Edict of Paris is that the mayors of the palace, who are basically like the governors of these individual kingdoms, like Neustria and Burgundy and Austrasia, they're each going to have a mayor of the palace. Well, the mayor of the palace is now going to take on greater power. They're initially going to be able to have a position for life, which means the king is not able to remove them from power, so they have more freedom to act as they'd like to act without having to really worry about the kings. And the kings of these kingdoms are going to become more and more figureheads. They are kings, they are rulers, but they're not going to care so much about the day-to-day rule of their kingdom. They're actually going to become known as the do-nothing kings. And it's the mayors of the palace who are more and more going to step forward as the real rulers of the Franks. So let's keep in mind the time period we're looking at here. You see here when it says the kingdom of the Franks, and when you have here the Rome rules the world section. So after Rome rules the world, that's when things really start to fall apart. That's when the Franks gradually rise to power. And we're not even done with looking at the Franks. We're going to have to look at what happens with the period after the Edict of Paris. You got the Lombards that are ruling over in Italy. You're also going to have the spread of Islam, and that's going to be a significant piece here in the future of the European world. And you have the Byzantine Empire that's lasting throughout all of this period. So this is a kind of unstable period. It's uncertain how things are going to work out. We'll see that the Franks are going to come out on top, but then eventually the Franks are going to have to deal with their own problems of the invasions of Vikings and other peoples. So we're going to have initially things getting more and more stable, but then they're going to become less stable. And we'll look at some of that in some of our future videos. And then after the Vikings, you'll again have a return of stability, which would be the later part of the medieval period. So this is the end of our section on what happens immediately after the Roman Empire falls. Is you have these barbarian kingdoms vying for power. You got the Byzantines who are trying to maintain their own power and kind of playing the barbarians off of each other. And it's the Franks, in the West at least, who are really the ones that are rising to the greatest position of power, and the ones that are expanding them. We'll see what happens as the Franks and the Lombards are going to end up in competition in our next video. Thank you.